Okay, next episode in the Value Quanta series. But first, quote of the video, and I think last video too. Where pride is insistent enough, memory prefers to give way. Friedrich Nietzsche. And recommended books: Escape from Freedom by Eric Fromm and The Denial of Death. The Denial of Death I've read like 17 times, and I'm in my 18th. No, that's just a bit of an exaggeration. But I have read The Denial of Death a few times, and I am currently reading it again. Escape from Freedom, I am in the process of reading. Quite good so far. So those are the recommended books. Current tastings: a Hawke's Bay Chardonnay, 2018, and Côte de Roussillon Village, 2017. Both have been slightly underwhelming, although I was expecting a little more from the Hawke's Bay Chardonnay than I was the Côte de Roussillon Village. But can't win them all, I guess. Anyway, on to the next episode of the Value Quanta series, and that is establishing your categories for success based on the question, am I really ever doing enough? And one of the challenges I've had throughout my career, and in my life, I guess, too, is being consistently confident that, is not being consistently confident enough, or confident that I'm doing enough. And I have this urge to contribute, and if I don't, it feels bad. And I'm not sure where this stems from exactly, but it could be some deep fear of not being good enough or accepted. I think it's also a factor of my personality, conscientiousness being a part of it. But I have an urge to be useful, to be industrious. And I think that pushes me to always try to make progress and feel like I'm contributing in a meaningful way. I don't know for sure, but it probably had something to do with my upbringing too. Like my father especially was very much like that, it seemed, now that I really think back. He just couldn't sit still. He couldn't relax. And maybe through some, I don't know whether I picked it up through osmosis or something, or just by picking up the vibe consistently, it just kind of like leaked into me. But over the years, that innate urge has persisted. However, I believe I'm much better at understanding what has the most impact, instead of just spinning my wheels, or trying to be busy or active without any real meaning or progress actual progress being made. A good example of this is from my own career, which involves a lot of driving, especially local driving. And one of the ways in which I felt I was moving, literally and figuratively, was by driving. I would have an idea of where I needed to go, but I wouldn't always execute. I would get there. Like, I've had times where I would drive to a certain customer, even if it was a cold call or someone that I actually knew, with the intent of making a visit, a sales call, but then some irrational fear would beset me. I'd be there, and then I would just leave. Like, I would just drive off, sit in my car for a little while, come up with all these justifications of why I shouldn't go in there or why I can't. Unfortunately, this doesn't really happen anymore because I'm much more cognizant of my limitations. I work smarter. I know what my time is worth and what's effective. But when looking back, I believe this kind of thing is necessary in some way early on in a career to an extent, because at least for me, my psychology wasn't honed. There's a lack of experience. I experienced a lot of fear and anxiety. And you need to reach in many different directions and learn from whatever experience you can. You're going to fail. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to work inefficiently until you can develop skills and experience and use those things to really dig deep into what will make you successful. And depending on the type of customer service role you're in, it can be a little more challenging to be able to create certainty around your role. For me, and it still is to this day, I'm in a role that's very independent. and you're required to work largely to build your own business and develop your own relationships and build your own effective habits and work ethic. And this leaves things more ambiguous, and and could be a challenging way to work for those that thrive with more structure and direction. They sort of need some level of leadership to guide them and steer them in the right direction. And this segues really nicely into today's topic, which is establishing your categories for success. Going back to the issue I mentioned earlier of really never knowing if I was doing enough. This comes from that. And I came across the idea of categories of success probably about 10 years ago when watching a Tony Robbins sales event. And it has served me very well over the years. Earlier on in my career, I read, watched, and listened to a lot of sales-oriented materials, business, management, mostly selling, but in a business context. And at this time in my life, I take more of a psychological and philosophical approach. So the material I consume really reflects that. And when it comes down to it, at least I think a lot of these sales books and business books, entrepreneurial, self-help books and things like that, I think they pull from a lot of philosophy and psychology of the past. So I don't really spend a lot of time on specific sales tactics per se, whereas now I work more on my character, and really just trying to understand myself so I can understand others, and then apply that to the customer service role that I'm in. And I've found for me that's been incredibly effective. I find it much more interesting. And while work is a very important aspect of my life, and I think for most people's life, it's not everything. I want as much as I possibly can for the things that I learn to be applicable in as much of my life as possible. And that's why I think I've taken an even greater step back as far as the content and material, and going back to the roots, the core of those kind of sales-oriented tactics and things like that, which I believe is heavily influenced by philosophy, by psychology and analytic psychology, things like that. And you can get a lot of that even in literature, Dostoevsky, and things like that of the past. So I find that much more compelling, so I stick to those types of things. And that's where I really learn most from and apply the valuequanta series, these concepts and things like that from. So back to the categories of success. The way I've used them centers on asking, what areas do I need to focus on in order to be successful in this role? And just a little bit of a side note, when coming up with these categories, it's really useful to make the category names interesting and fun. And I remember in that Tony Robbins sales event I was watching, that's something that he emphasized as well, just to make it a little more interesting, make it fun. And I've named mine after Magic the Gathering cards that I feel fit the theme and concept of what the category really represents. It's a game I love to play, and I think the themes, the artwork, the concepts are so interesting and cool, which is why I wanted to use the card names. So the first one, and what I'll do now is kind of go over the categories that I've established for my professional life, for my work. I really encourage you to do that for your personal life as well. I also have categories of success for my personal life, but the ones I'll be going over now are strictly for my professional life, for my job. So I guess I can get started here. So the first one is crop rotation. So this category asks, where do I need to go? Who do I need to see? And when I say where do I need to go, I mean physically, to what location do I need to go? Which customers do I need to visit? And I do it on a weekly basis. And again, this category focuses on consistently seeing customers in order to be there for them, and build lasting relationships. I believe, and again, this depends on your role, too. But I believe great customer service involves being in front of people on a consistent basis, and it's one area in which I have never wavered. It's about nurturing and maintaining relationships, and for myself and my role, it's about long-term relationships. It's about being there consistently and reliably for people so that they can do whatever they need to do securely and quickly and reliably. So number one is crop rotation. And I thought that was a really neat card name and idea because it goes, I think it harkens to that nurturing aspect. You know, if you think of, or if I think of my customer base as my support structure, you know, they support me, but I need to nurture those relationships in order for them to grow and really thrive. So that's why I thought crop rotation was a really appropriate name. The second is burning inquiry. And this is my way of keeping track of pressing matters, you know, that they need to be addressed within 24 to 48 hours. So inquiries, outcomes, tasks, problems, any answers I need to provide, anything that I need to address relatively quickly. And that's based off of how quickly my customer or colleagues or whoever it is needs an answer. And you kind of pick these things up as time goes on, depending on how your customer does business. You get to pick up on patterns and say, oh, okay, you know, this request will probably need an answer very quickly. It could be explicitly stated by them, I need this right away, get back to me as soon as you can. But I found it's very useful to pick up on the patterns of the people that you deal with on a consistent basis, because then you really get a feel for how they like to do business. So pretty simple. It's almost like a to-do list. It's a very reactive category. So these come from the outside in, and I'll make a quick note of them, and then I just know that I need to address them within 24 to 48 hours, usually even within 24 hours. And I think the name of the category is pretty self-explanatory. It's a burning inquiry. It needs an answer as soon as possible. And the third is restore balance. This one is about order and structure. Longer term efforts and tasks that help create and or maintain equilibrium and attempt to make things run more effectively. You know, dependent on role, whatever customer service role you're in, or really any role, doesn't necessarily have to be customer service. But in my own case, examples include pricing systems, agreements, contracts, processes, claims or complaints, fixing inconsistencies and errors. In essence, I use this category to create balance and prevent small inconsistencies from becoming larger problems. Because I found these things are definitely noticeable if you pay attention. And if systematic flaws aren't really uprooted and corrected, it will create much more chaos sometime down the line. So I like to find and establish these things as quickly as I possibly can in order for there to be more order and less chaos. And restore balance, I thought was a very appropriate name to that end. So this is what? Number 4. This category is called Bring to Light. So this one is more of a reflective category. It really asks, what can I learn from my experiences? Is there something deeper that I can pull from a particular occurrence or experience that I've just had? Anything that sticks out to me, I will think critically about and try to understand it at a deeper level. And it's often focused on why I think it happened and how it affects me. And then I can apply that knowledge in how I move forward. And this category is especially useful for contemplating errors in judgment and mistakes and what can be learned from them. It's also really useful to look at and really pick apart any experiences that feel out of the ordinary, especially in your own behavior. I've found that any anomalies or any unusual way that I've acted, I'd ask myself, well, why do I think I acted that way? Maybe it was because a person you regularly deal with was acting in an unusual way, or your kind of routine, your day to day was completely thrown off, and it in turn threw you off. And so it's very useful to note anything that just sticks out in your mind, something that's unusual, or you really want to learn about, or you really didn't know how to react, or what to do about a certain scenario or person, or really anything. I think, and the criteria for me is kind of anything that sticks out in my head. I'll take note of it, and then go from there. And some, it's just a few minutes of kind of analysis and understanding. Others, it could take months, weeks, to really just sort of pick apart and glean something from them. So this one is about unearthing deeper meanings and understanding within oneself, but then in also maybe other people's behaviors and why they may have done something like that, what an occurrence or a certain situation potentially might mean to you, mean to others, and things like that. The next category is tireless tracker, and this might also sound pretty obvious, and it is fairly simple. I use this category to establish what I'll do in order to develop new opportunities and new relationships. Part of this role is being able to develop new business, to build new opportunities and things like that, to grow my sales, to grow my influence. And that's what this category is focused on. It's about understanding your current business, looking for opportunities, different markets, understanding your customer's business so you can recommend different solutions to them. And again, in this category, I specify the means in which I'll do those things. So I'll specify, a company name that I haven't visited before, or company names or people that I'd like to just say hello to, or introduce myself to, or cold call, or just try and offer some sort of value, see if there is a fit in working together. And that's about it. It's fairly simple, this one. And Tireless Tracker, not only one of the best magic cards printed, but just wholly appropriate for this category. The next is Scape Shift. This one focuses on more of a macro look at the business I'm in, the industry. It's how's the market changing? How is the industry changing? Are there big shifts coming in how business is done, or how my company will move forward, or my vendors, suppliers, different product segments, things like that? This category is about change and understanding its effects. It's about laying out what I need to do in order to adapt to the changes that I'm anticipating, whether it be through specific actions or changes in thinking and mindset. So it's a 10,000-foot view of where I think things are going to go and how I need to adapt to them. The scape shift, the landscape is shifting. It's kind of taking a larger view of the whole picture of where you are and the future and the industry, so you can really navigate it. Whereas the previous categories, other than perhaps bring to light, they have more of a specific focus and a specific look at how I'm working and the circumstances and things like that. And these last categories that I'll be discussing are more of a macro look. Might be a bit tougher to come up with content within these categories, and which is why I don't do them as frequently. I might do Scape Shift quarterly, or twice a year, something like that, where the impact is greater, so I need more time to develop and kind of accumulate the knowledge necessary to effectively lay out the category. The next is Past in Flames. This category continues on the theme of change, but here it's specific to my attitude, mindset, habits, and patterns. So it's kind of like the opposite side of the same coin, I suppose, with Scapeshift. It asks, what about me and the way I work needs to grow and evolve? What old parts of me need to burn away? And I use this category when facing new challenges or intimidating circumstances so I can face them at best. This one involves a lot more personal aspects of me, personality, habits, things that affect my work and that might need to change or be completely eliminated. Whereas the previous category, Scapeshift, kind of focuses on the industry and what I see changing. Past in Flames, it's kind of like, okay, I know where I need to, in what areas externally I need to adapt and change, as sort of in order to be proactive or reactive. Past in Flames, I really look at myself and the way I have been and the way I've worked and the way I've thought, and say and ask, what of that needs to change? It might not need to, or what needs to evolve, what needs to grow, and then I specify those things on a personal level, and then I relate them to my work. And that's such a cool name, Past in Flames. I love it. It's kind of that. I think it was, I don't know if it was Bruce Lee, but I think he had a quote along those lines of, burn away what isn't necessary. And that's the idea behind this category. The last one is the newest category, and it's called Counterbalance. And I'm still working it out. It was inspired by reading Carl Jung's 2 essays of analytical psychology. And there's a lot of discussion around opposites within one's psychology in those essays. And I won't pretend to know everything that he was trying to say. However, it made me look at my own psychology more closely. And try and recognize where those opposites are. And the essays are right here. I'm just going to grab them. Because there's a couple of passages that I wanted to read, I think, that really demonstrate the essence of this. The first one's page 42. Yeah, and the first one is, neurosis is intimately bound up with the problem of our time and really represents an unsuccessful attempt on the part of the individual to solve the general problem in his own person. Neurosis is self-division. In most people, the cause of the division is that the conscious mind wants to hang on to its moral ideal, while the unconscious strives after its, in the contemporary sense, unmoral ideal, which the conscious mind tries to deny. Men of this type want to be more respectable than they really are. You know what? I'm going to read the rest of this too. But the conflict can be easily the other way about. There are men who are all to appearances very disreputable and do not put the least restraint upon themselves. This is at bottom only a pose of wickedness, for in the background they have their moral side, which has fallen into the unconscious, just as surely as the immoral side in the case of the moral man. And then he's got in parentheses here, extremes should therefore be avoided as far as possible, because they always arouse suspicion of their opposite. And then the other, page 85. These essays are amazing, by the way. I'm on my second run through of these, but the conscious mind is on top, the shadow underneath, and just as high always longs for low and hot for cold, so all consciousness, perhaps without being aware of it, seeks its unconscious opposite, lacking which it is doomed to stagnation, congestion, and ossification. Life is born only of the spark of opposites. And there's another part here. It has become abundantly clear to me that life can flow forward only along the path of the gradient. but there is no energy unless there is a tension of opposites. Hence, it is necessary to discover the opposite to the attitude of the conscious mind. So those are a couple of examples, and the discussion is fairly extensive behind those concepts. This specific context there was the discussion between eros and the will to power, kind of two different aspects of, I guess, what drives our psyches. And I'm not going to get into that completely here. That's not the point. But I honestly don't know what to fully make of this topic. However, so far where it has led me is to greater understanding. And the way I use it is with a key question. I ask, what type of person would I have to be if? Then with that, I try and look at those personalities out there that are very different from mine and ask that question. And I find this especially useful in customer service because it allows me to put myself in others' shoes very effectively and consider perspectives, feelings, and behaviors that may seem alien to me. And a similar, I guess, idea or concept that Jung also talks about is the shadow. And that's that opposite side to us, things that have been suppressed or repressed by our conscious mind into our unconscious. And they're often negative because, from what I understand, from what I've read, is that the negative aspects of us are most often repressed because we don't want to confront them. And that's a lot of what counterbalance is. It's an attempt to look at what I see in my conscious mind day to day, my attitudes, my behaviors, my thought patterns, and look at their opposite. And try and pull those opposites from my unconscious to confront them. And that may be through resentments, which is, one of the first, I think the first episode I did in the valuequanta series was about that. It's about learning from, actually, I think it was the third episode. Anyway, it's about learning from your resentments. Where do they lie? And unearthing them to see what could cause them, or what greater understanding of your own psychology can you get from understanding those things. And that's what counterbalance is. And I'm still refining this category, but I try to take ways of thinking and beliefs and the understanding I have of myself consciously, and I try and understand their opposites. I try and see if the opposites of those things are within me. And that opens up, I think, a greater acceptance of oneself. And it allows you to overcome potential challenges that might arise and manifest themselves in ways that you can't control. And a good example, again, is of your resentments. If you don't acknowledge where your resentments are, they will manifest in ways that you can't control, whether it's just snapping and showing anger at someone that you may actually resent, or how you speak to them, or if you're excessively passive-aggressive or sarcastic, things like that. So they may manifest in that way, and you'll have no control or little control of them, and you might do something that you regret. So again, this category, I'm not 100% sure what I'm doing with, but in essence, it has that tension of opposites that I'm very fascinated with. And that's it. And the amount of categories here, I just sort of came up with and asked myself, but it's also useful to ask others within your field. Hey, what has made you successful in this field? Granted that they are successful. Or it could be a mentor or someone that you trust, and say, what categories or what focus do you think I need in order to be successful in this role? And then take them down and refine them, make them your own, make them fun, and also reassess them. I've found that these that I have so far have worked very well. And I'm also adding to them. Another category that I think I'll add sometime in the near future has to do more with numbers and being able to look at numbers pertinent to business, sales and profit margins and those kinds of things specific around numbers. And I love the name Le Chiffre from, I think it's it's the Bond movie, Casino Royale. That's such a cool name. I think that means the number. But that really wouldn't fit the Magic the Gathering theme, and I do want to keep the Magic the Gathering theme, so I'll have to come up with something or find a card name that really works here. But be sure to reassess your categories also. They're meant to evolve and change with you. And if your role changes, even whether it's within the same company or same industry, or if you completely change your industry and role, the categories may have to change also. So, takeaways. One, understand your role as best as possible and determine what aspects of it need attention and focus in order for you to be successful. Look within yourself, but also ask others that you see as being successful and that have shown a lot of success in that role or roles related to it. Whether it's colleagues, friends, experienced people or others, or a mentor, something like that. Number two, establish your categories. Think them through and what they mean to you. Outline how you're going to use them and how they will enrich your professional and personal life. Have fun with them. For me, again, I ended up using Magic the Gathering cards because I really enjoy the game, and the card names and themes I thought were so on point that it made the overall experience more engaging, and it still does. And maybe one day I'll completely change them and move to something else. But and then the final takeaway is be sure to check in periodically and make sure your categories change and evolve with you. 8 categories. That's right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, 8 categories is right for where I am now. But maybe it'll be 6 in a year or 12 in 5 years. The key is staying in touch and keeping things current and meaningful. So that's it for this episode of the Value Quanta series. Establish your categories for success. All right. Thanks, guys. I'll see you later.